looking at this first example, it's asking you for part A to describe how the percents found in the pieces of pottery are similar and how they are different just for chemical Z. So for this first part, we are only looking at these 3 box plots. So whenever you are looking at those, what is something that you could tell me how they're similar? What do you guys think? What do you notice about those 3 box plots that are the same? Yeah, the median is the same on all of those because the median, that line going across the middle of the box plots, that's similar for all of these. So we would say that the medians for chemical Z are similar. Now, what about the IQR? The IQR is the measurement of the box. Are they the same or are they different? What do you think? Say site 2 is different, but what about 1 and 3? Say that is something that you can say. You can say the IQR for sites 1 and 3 are similar. But would you guys agree that site 2 is much smaller? All right, so for a box plot, we've talked about the median. We've talked about the IQR. What's the only thing about the box plot we've not mentioned yet? All right, we've not talked about the range or those whisker lengths. And on this one, we can say the range, are any of the ranges the same or are they all pretty much their own thing? All right, and then we would say, and they all have different ranges. All right, do you notice that whenever I describe that, did I mention numbers anywhere? All right, but did I talk about the chemicals and the sites? So I've mentioned the context. Now, if you wanted to say and what is the median? Say it's in between 6 and 8. So if you had said, instead of saying similar, if you just said that the medians are all about 7, and then you could have mentioned the actual measurements of the IQR and the ranges, but you don't have to. Just as long as you are saying how they're similar and how they're different, you're going to get the points. So I want you guys to know that there are 3 things that you are looking for on this. You have to mention something in order to get an E. You have to mention something about the medians, the IQR, and the range. So if you list all 3 of those, you're going to get an E. If you have 2 out of the 3, you get a P. And if you have 1 out of the 3, you get an I. And if you're missing 0, that's also an I. So then you guys would give yourself a score. Oh, I'm trying to. Virtual kids, I'm sorry. I'm trying to make it to where you can see everything. So whenever you have all 3 of those, it's an E. 2 out of 3 is a P, and then 1 out of the 3 is an I. So I honestly would expect, I'm hoping you guys all got 2s and 3s. How did you guys do on that? Got a 2? Say with masks, it's hard to hear or read lips, so you guys can just give me, tell me, and I'm not judging. What did you give yourself for this? A 3, 2, 1, 0. What do you think? 2s? All right. What are you guys missing? Like the IQR? So that's just one thing that whenever you are looking at these, and think about what are all of the parts of a box plot. All right, so just a general box plot. All right, what value is this? In that 5-number summary, remember you get 5 numbers on the calculator. All right, we know that's the median. Oh, it's not an upper fence. What's that? The highest point. All right, it's a max. All right, down here is a min. What's this? So in this, if you want to correctly describe it, you have to make sure that all pieces are hit. So in this one, obviously the median is hit, and then these two represent the IQR, and then these two represent the range. So whenever you have to make sure that all pieces of the box plot are hit somewhere. And so like the two quartiles make the IQR, the max and the minimum make the range. And if you guys want to make notes on these, on like what you can actually write, like it may be in a different color, what you're missing and what you should write. All right, and then on the second one, so we're looking at part B, we're going to look at part 1 first. So it says, suppose that you have an analysis of the clay that reveals the sum of the percents of the 3 chemicals is 20.5. Based on the box plots, which site is the most likely site where this piece is originated? So it says the percents of the 3 chemicals is around 20. What would you guys say? Did you guys say site 1, 2, or 3? And if you totally guessed, it's fine, but what site did you say? So I see a couple people say site 1. Did anybody say site 2? I'll say, did anybody say site 3? You said 1? All right, so I'm going to show you guys something. Oh, hang on. I got to look up something really quick. Hang on. That doesn't even look like the right question. I want to make sure I have the exact E's, P's, and I's on this. All right, so here is what we have for part B. All right, so for part B, it actually would be part B, it's most likely originated at site 3. So the correct answer for this one is site 3. And here's why. If you wanted to add if you added the medians for each part, if we go back to the question, all right, if we wanted to add all of these medians, What is 7 plus 13 plus 7? Because it said the percents added together is around 20. So for just site 1, if you add the median, 7 plus 13 plus 7 gives you 27. That's definitely different than 20.5. Now, if you add the medians for site 2, what is 6 plus 3 plus 7? You'll say that's 16, that's a little short. But what happens when you add the medians on site 3? Because median, if we're going to guess off of it, we expect them half of the data to be around the middle. So if we add all of those, we have 6 plus 7 plus 7. That's 20. So whenever you add all of those median scores, this one here is the one that's closest to the 20.5, so that's why we choose that one. So if you show any sort of work or if you just explain, we choose site 3, and if you add the medians, because that is the middle or the base, you expect half of your data to be around the middle. So if you add the medians and then that site 3's median is the closest to 20. So site 3, because whenever you add those, site 3 is the closest to 20.5. All right, so now let's take a look at that scoring guideline. So it is telling us that for section 2, a numerical justification in that you choose site 3. And we didn't do maximum and minimum, we did medians. That's also an appropriate thing. So choosing site 3 is a point, showing some work to compute it is a point, and then explaining it is a point. So first of all, if you choose a different site, you're going to get an I. So on this one, if you had all 3, if you chose site 3 and had numbers and explanations, that's a 3. If you chose site 3 but didn't have any work, if you just said site 3 and an explanation, that would be a 2. And then if you chose site 3 without an explanation or any work, that would be a 1 or an incomplete. And then if you chose the wrong site, then that's an I as well. Say I didn't do a good job on explaining that. So if you had all 3 pieces, and I'm just explaining this for the people that aren't here right now. So if you had work, picking the right site, and explained it, that's an E. If you had 2, so that's like if you picked site 3 and had this without the work, that would be a 2. And if you chose site 3 without any other reason behind it, that's an I. And then if you pick the wrong site, that's an I. All right, now the last part, it says, suppose only one chemical could be analyzed in this piece of pottery. Which would be the most useful in identifying where the piece of pottery was originated? So if you want to look for something to identify, you want to find a feature that stands out between the 3. So if you look at these, look at chemical X. Do you think the box plots for each chemical for each site, if you look at chemical X, do you see how these are all, they're pretty close together, right? So do you think that chemical X would be an easy way to decipher which site it came from? Now, look at chemical Y. All right, chemical Y, are any of those remotely the same? All right, this is probably a good chance that that's going to be the right answer because they're all way different from each other. And now chemical Z, even though they look a little bit different, site 1 and site 3 look so similar that it would be easy to tell if it was from site 2, but these two are so similar. The only one where the box plots are vastly different from each other would be chemical Y. So you would just simply say chemical Y, and then you could state why. So chemical Y is the correct reason, or the correct chemical, and then the reason you would say is because the data from each site for chemical Y is extremely different from each other. I didn't spell that right. All right, and if you can see for section 2, all right, you get an essentially correct if you choose chemical Y and give a reason, partially correct if you pick Y and don't say why, and then you get an I if you have anything else. So on this one, so you need to say this and that. So you have to say chemical Y and give a reason to get an E. So you have to have both parts to get an E. Now if you just, to get a, so if you just say chemical Y, you get a P. And then if you pick anything else, that's an I. All right, so how many of you guys got an E on this one? Yay, this is good. All right, so hopefully everybody had E's and P's here. So then for the final scoring, it actually tells you all right, so in order to get a 4, you had to have 3 E's. So if you had E's on each part, you give yourself a 4. If you had 2 out of the 3 sections, essentially, so if you had 2 E's and a P, that is a 3. So you got a 3 if you had 2 E's and a P. All right, you get a 2 if you have an E, an E, and an I. That's what the first part is. The second one is an E and 2 P's, or 3 P's. And then a 1 is if you have only 1 E in the rest, like if you have PIE or IIE. And then PPI. All right, so I kind of wrote it with E's and P's. So find your combination, and then you tell me, so based on your combination, if you got any other combination, it's a 0. So on these, I'll say right up at the top what your score was. So I got by your name somewhere. You guys can either write or type. Did you guys get a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1? And honestly, for this one, there's a lot of stuff in it. I don't think that the question was necessarily difficult, but there was just a lot of components to it that if you missed one, it kind of hurt you a little bit. So honestly, for this one, I was expecting 2s and 3s on your first try. Now, if you got a 4, that's great. But I figured that I would expect 2s and 3s on this, just honestly from that first question. I'm looking. Say, Will, how did you do, or do you not do this one?
Oh, I did.
You got a 3. Let's get 2s and 3s. Nope. Nope. If you have your work, say that is one thing the graders do not care where. If it's on the blank, if it's on the page, it'll get graded. That's fine with me. Nice work. we don't have much time. Say whenever we're recording, it just takes a lot longer. I just want to make sure everybody at home, say we don't have time to talk about this one. This one is, there's a lot of details on this one. Oh, this one was a really easy one. Okay, let's open up F. This is the one that you guys did last week. All right, so let's look at Frappy F, and I'll go in and unlock it so you guys can see it. All right, and I will tell you guys, on Frappy F, Peyton, I'm sorry, I'm not asking your permission. I'm just going to show everybody your work because I really liked your answer. All right, so I will say Peyton did a great job at answering this question. So it was asking you how bias could have been introduced based on how the sample was selected and how people could have been selected differently to avoid bias. And there's a lot of different things that you guys could have written, but one of the things that you are talking about, it's asking you the first 100 students entering the dining hall, and it says many students believe that the food served in the dining hall needs improvement, and do you think the quality of food needs improvement even though that would increase the cost of the meal plan? So the second time you can talk about why that question was a bad question, but right now we're just talking about why picking the first 100 students would be a bad idea. So Peyton says that they're most likely going to say their opinion, one, because they haven't gotten their food yet because they just entered the dining hall. That was a great point. And then then it's also saying people are probably starving and only focused on getting their food at the moment, and so they just kind of answer it and go on. I actually think that's a really good point as well. Did anybody else mention anything different? Because there's probably like 5 different things that you could have said here. Okay, different groups of people. Obviously, there's probably some reasons why those people come in first. Now, something else I thought about, and I don't know if any of you guys mentioned this, they're only asking people that are at the dining hall. Okay, so don't you think that there's probably people that are choosing not to eat the dining hall food because they don't like it? Okay, if you mention that they're not sampling people that, like the people that are upset with it probably aren't at the dining hall. So it's not going to give you a full representation of your entire student body just because it's missing that component that you're not asking people that are making the choice not to eat even though they've probably paid for it. So that is something that you can mention. So on this one, it's honestly, you're either getting an E or an I. You're either answering this because you made a valid point or you're getting an I because it made no sense. So you guys can make that decision if you feel like your answers were great. And I will tell you guys, I read these and I liked almost all of your answers. So if there's something that you're not for sure about, I would be more than happy to look at it and tell you if you got an E or an I. But as long as you are mentioning something and having a valid reason why you shouldn't just pick the first 100 people, and you have a reason to back it up, you're going to get the points on that one. Now, on the second part, it says how it would have been introduced about the question or how the question was worded. What part of this question is bad? Okay, so if you would have just ended the question right there, it probably would have been okay. If you mentioned something about this last part of the question creating bias in your answer, you get an E.
I think the first part is also kind of introducing bias because it's saying like some students are already thinking that it needs improvement instead of just asking them, do you think it needs improvement?
Do you guys think that's valid? I agree. That first sentence, like just putting that negative thought right off the bat before you ask them their opinion. No, that's definitely, like, this is a horribly worded question. Now, if you guys, and it says suggest how it would be worded differently. So the first thing that you're going to get points on this part is naming your bias. So whether you talked about the first part or the last part or both. And then the second part, to reword it. How would you have reworded that question? And as long as you had a decent reword, so if you had both parts, that's an E. If you named this and didn't reword it, or vice versa, so if you only had one of the components, that's a P, or if you had 0 of the components, that's an I. And so that also goes for, and I probably should have mentioned that on A. The first thing you had to do was name your bias. And then it says to suggest. So then your suggestion would be your other part. So 2 parts is an E, 1 part is a partial, 0 is an I. All right, so to score this one overall, how do you think you're going to get a 4? All right, so for a 4, that's from getting 2 E's. How do you think you could get a 3? An E and a P. How do you think you could get a 2? 2 P's. There's actually one other one. An E and an I. Have you guys noticed that it's like almost like you average? So like a 2 plus 2 is a 4. And then a 2 plus 1 is a 3. And any way that you could add your scores up to get 2, or an average of 2. So we got that. All right, and then if you get a 1, that's from having this, and then a 0 would be 2 incompletes. So then how did you guys do on that one? Just quickly show me. I'm hoping for lots of 4s and 3s. I understand sometimes you give yourself a 2, things happen. But hey, that's good. All right, so if you guys had to pick one of these, which one would you not want next Thursday for one that's for a grade out of the ones that we went over? The chemical site one that we just went over? That's like one of my favorites. But you like this? Well, this one's not bad. Now, I will tell you guys, this is just honestly where I'm thinking about this. If we are in person next Thursday, I can tell you that it's probably going to be Frappy C or Frappy D if we're in person. All right, so if we are in person, my goal is to either do Frappy C or D for a grade. So this is like the company box plot one or this one. So if it's in person, it's going to be a box plot question. If we are virtual, it's probably going to be this one, a biased question, or one like this, but the numbers will be different. And so like the bias question, it'll be a different question, but it'll be asking you to do the same thing. But I'll just give you another horribly written question and survey. All right, so guys, do you have any questions for me? I know this week was a really slow week, and next week it's like back to normal, like lectures, notes, assignments. So I can tell you guys, if I have my paper somewhere, Say I'll start updating the calendar for next week during 6th and 7th hour now that you guys are out of here for the day. So I can tell you guys this is my plan. Monday we're going to take notes and do some in-class stuff. And I will assign your homework that'll be due Friday. Then on Wednesday will be a reading guide. And then Thursday is a Frappy 4 grade. And then Friday we'll start Chapter 12 notes. Chapter 1 is really small. But I don't know, did you guys notice I put some YouTube videos on Canvas? All right, so I know I didn't mention it yesterday, but I'm mentioning it today. These are very short. So if you guys go to Canvas and you can see there are 2 YouTube videos. One is, it's just some basic calculator instructions that if we don't have to use class time to learn the keys to those, it'll make things a lot faster. And so the first video, I can't remember which one's first. All right, so the first one is how to generate random numbers on your calculator. And I put 2 videos up. One, the top video, when it says CE, that's the color edition. So it's like Will and Dawson, and I think Audrey. If you have to charge your calculator, you got to follow the top instructions. If you have one of my calculators or an equivalent to one of mine, you use the bottom one. They just look slightly different. So just follow the video of whatever calculator you have if you're a regular 84 or if you're the color edition. And then on the second part, I think for the second video, I think everybody has the same instructions. If the instructions are different, color edition people, let me know on Monday if they're different. So I think one video's like 4 minutes and the other one's like 2. But if we know how to do that, it'll just save so much time. So just take some time to watch those, and I will tell you guys, we only have chapter 11, chapter 12, and chapter 13, and they all interconnect, like chapter 7 and 8 kind of went together. So these next 3 chapters go together, and then we have a project, and that's it until Christmas. So let's see, I have 1 quiz, 1 project, 1 lab, and that's it. All right, temporary virtuals, if you need me, you guys know how to get a hold of me. Have a great weekend.